Hello and welcome to the Outcomes Over Hours show. I'm Tina Patterson and I am so excited for the guest that I have today. I'm here with Chee Hoong and he is the Director of Operations and Capability for McKinsey. So a massive role that you've got and a very, very impressive resume to boot. So Chee Hoong he's a serial transformer. He's done things such as leading the strategy at one of Malaysia's largest telcos, leading the transformation, which I know can be so hard to do, for another one of Southeast Asia's largest plantation companies, really with a focus on transformation, improving operational efficiencies and productivity. At McKinsey, he's held numerous roles such as project manager, senior advisor, and as I said, really focused on that capability, operations, and transformation. In addition, and finally, Chee Hoong is also a Rhodes Scholar former Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. So Chee Hoong, welcome to the Outcomes Over Hours show.
Thank you, Tina, for having me on your show.
Fantastic. And look, this one is a different interview than we usually do because for listeners, it's usually via screen. And we are here literally in person in my home office. That bookcase is real. So I know a lot of people ask me that. So it's great to see you in person.
Likewise, thank you again.
Fantastic. So I would love to hear from you about your own leadership style with your impressive career in terms of how it has changed. If you think back pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, where you were also in charge of helping navigate McKinsey's teams and thinking about future ways of working, to your leadership style now, how has it changed over that time?
You know, we were just having a conversation about this before we started recording, right? I think over the last 5 years, so much change has happened so rapidly, right? If I think back about my own experience in 2019, everything was in person. I was meeting people in person. I was working on site. My teams were around me, right? And then from one extreme to the other in 2020, we were just 100% at home, 100% separated. And today, it's somewhere in between, right? And this hybrid model is still being developed. Jury's out where we land, right? So I think very importantly, in terms of leadership, not just leadership in terms of people leadership, but leadership over so many different things, right? Yeah. In terms of our real estate, in terms of technological leadership, in terms of process leadership, we've had to be very flexible, and I've had to be very flexible. So one thing that I found has sort of changed, but not quite changed so much, right? I'll explain, is the pastoral role of a leader, right? Where I've seen myself having much more, I think, one-on-one conversations and coaching and so on, right? With folks. I mean, if you think about it, the pandemic changed so much in terms of the way we work. In COVID, for instance, we were talking about how we were cooped up at home in an Asian setting where many of our officers are still located in very patriarchal societies, right? You'd have situations where, for instance, lots of our women colleagues would have had to work from home. And when they were working from home, they were still expected by their extended family, right, to be performing the household roles. Right? And they couldn't say, you know what, let's demarcate. I'm home, but I'm not quite home. That didn't quite fly. And so we found colleagues were much more stressed than they were even before the pandemic. They had to do a lot more work. And then the line between work and home kind of blurred. And if you didn't manage that properly, then you came under a lot of stress. So a lot of my time was spent thinking about, okay, well, what are the sort of mental health issues that we were having and that we would have to sort of work to manage. Lots of thinking around how do we make work processes more efficient? How do we automate? How do we digitize so that we freed up a lot more time for our people, right? So there's a lot of that, I guess, empathy and creativity that needed to go on.
Yes, wonderful. And I agree. And so many leaders talk about that pastoral care role of how it's okay now and it's actually expected for people to bring their whole selves to work. And as a leader, if you're just focused on the work and have you done the task, you're going to disengage your people pretty quickly because they're giving so much both at work as well as outside. So
Absolutely.
it's a great point.
Absolutely. And there's also a generational thing, right? I think the younger, newer generation expect that thing, right? That they're seen as a holistic human being,
Yes.
right? Everything around them is relevant to work, rather than I think maybe like a few generations before, when you had to almost segment your life between home and work. The pandemic showed us that actually these two are interwoven and very difficult to separate.
That's a great point. And I expect it's only going to continue moving in the direction of people and leaders being expected to open up about themselves, bringing their whole selves to work as well. Because like you, I'm now 47 years old for me. And so I've grown up in that corporate environment where it's the professional side, and then you can leave and then you can relax and be yourself.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of unlearning there to go, actually, this is who I am now at work as well as how I am on the weekend. But for the people the younger generations coming through, that's just how they are.
That's
and
right.
So us oldies having to adapt a little bit more. So I guess I'm interested on that theme about what are the, say, 2 to 3 key leadership skills that you believe that leaders need to be able to lead in this hybrid world of work that we are in now?
Wow. So I'll speak for myself and what worked from my experience, right? I think one thing we really need is basically creativity. Because if you look at how we are today, right, a lot of our colleagues are still working remotely, right? And so then the question becomes, how do you actually be inclusive, right? And give equal opportunities to people who are on site and people who are sort of remote, right? So one of the things we did, for instance, was as part of learning, we ditched a lot of those talking head Zoom based learnings to adopt more interactive. And so we had, for example, escape rooms that we were playing in hybrid mode, right? Where some of our folks would be joining as a team in a team room, so 2 or 3 folks, and then 2 or 3 other people would be joining remotely, and we try and solve a problem together and escape the room, as it were. Right? Now, one of the big learnings that we got from the exercise, which was self-internalized, was that very quickly, in a very stressful situation, you found that the folks in the room were talking to each other because they were like chasing time and completely ignoring people who were dialing in. And so at the end, when we debriefed and we reflected on that, we're like, oh, we actually forgot to ask everyone else. And people elsewhere had bits and pieces of the answers, right, that you would have missed if you hadn't engaged them.
That's amazing.
Right?
That's such a great insight. And we see it so often where if the majority are in the room, that's where the conversation happens. And to your point, as a leader and to be inclusive, it's almost thinking of going around the table, and the table includes looping in those who are dialed in as well, because reality happens where there are days where we all do expect to be in the office, and for whatever reason, a couple of people do need to dial in from home. So it's a skill, to your point, that really does need to be amplified.
Absolutely.
Fantastic insight. Are there any others that come to mind, or is the creativity and that inclusiveness of how we work in hybrid the key thing that you think people should focus on?
Yes, I think that's the main focus, but I think holistically, when we think about, I think not just hybrid, but in sort of any transformation that we do, right, in life, whether it's a digital transformation or a physical one, I've always subscribed to these 4 Ps, the framework. So that's some tip for the audience, right? We always think about the product. So I'll give an example, right, of even before the pandemic, when we were, for instance, introducing a mechanization program for some of the farms that we were working on. And you think about the product, the machines, right, the tractors, the farm implements, and so on. But to actually make that really successful, right, for everyone who's involved, you actually needed to think about the other 3 Ps. So the other one with the process, right? So yeah, we've got some implements now in the farm. Are they working the right way? Have we thought about the most efficient way to run the whole system, right? So that's the second P. The third P would be your people. Are they trained? Are they actually trained to drive the farm implements? Are they actually trained to maintain them, right? And finally, the fourth P is the place, the whole environment that this whole thing is operating in, right? So have we made the roads, clear enough, right, for the tractors to move and so on? So do we have the right workshops, right? So product, process, people, place. Those would be the four, I think, things that, as a leader, you need to think holistically about the problem, right? And, whether before or after the pandemic, try to solve them using this in mind.
I love that so much. And you mentioned the word being efficient, which is one of my passion areas as well. And as you know, with my outcomes over our system, what I teach for corporate leadership teams is how to be effective. So what you focus on, how to be efficient, how you go about doing it, and how do you be energetic, the rocket fuel of looking after yourself.
Absolutely.
Now, I know that you have very deep expertise on all these areas, but your passion, it seems, the efficiency and how can you optimize in this space. Could you share some of your learnings in this space from leading the large transformation programs that might be useful for other leaders?
Yep, I can. But before we do that, I love your outcome over hours phrase. And interestingly, you're not using the word output because there's a big difference.
Deliberate.
Yes, correct. So efficiency itself, it is not an end. It's kind of a means to an end. It unlocks a lot of time for our teams to think about more value-added things or even spend more leisure time at home, right?
Absolutely. It's interesting on that. I had lunch with a client yesterday and I was saying there's no point being really, really efficient if you're not being effective. In other words, there's no point being really productive if it's not the things that will actually move the needle and help the business. There's no point. So absolutely.
That's hitting the nail on the head.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So in the area, though, of efficiency, what advice or what lessons learned have you got to share with other leaders?
Yep, sure. So I think we've talked about the 4 Ps, the holistic problem solving already, so we won't go there again. But I think the second thing that we really need is ownership, right? And it's really what's in it for you, right? When we implement a process change, when we introduce a new technology, right? What's in it for you in terms of the time that you save, right? Or the hours that you can spend more at home, or how the work quality actually improves, right? I think again, I think back to one example where in a sort of remote part of Indonesia, we were introducing a kind of a solar-powered fertigation system. Now, fertigation is a cross between fertilization and irrigation. So yes, so a new little new word. Yeah. So we were introducing fertilizers and water, right, into plants, and so the efficiency that we were talking here, it's not just time efficiency; it's in terms of resource efficiency. We use less water. It's also in terms of financial efficiency, right? You pay less for the sort of running that particular bit of the farm. And I remember at the beginning, the more seasoned farmers were really apprehensive about this. They're like, water's a really critical thing. If you get this wrong, things go bad very quickly. Plants actually die, right? So this is literally a fatal mistake if it was. And so there was a lot of effort in basically just including them, right, in the thinking about efficiency and how it would work and bringing the experience on board. Actually having them and sort of the field managers run the system, contribute different ideas. And I think for me, the success that I measured from that particular project was not that it actually worked. We saved a lot. We saved planting time, we saved a lot of money and so on. But that at the end, they were able to then stand up in front of the executives and say, oh, actually, this was our brainchild, my idea. And it was great to let them take the credit, right? For this. So the ownership of the efficiency is really important.
I love that. Yeah, one of the things that's very aligned that I learned being a transformation director is it's not about the widget that you deliver or what that looks like, but the change management piece of when you move out, is it being owned by the people who have to actually do the work? That what's in it for me is one of the most powerful questions that anyone can ask, whether it's a large transformation program or it's just something small that you're doing in your team that's different than how they've done things previously.
Absolutely.
So beautiful, beautiful. And what is the best, most practical advice you've ever been given about working smarter?
Wow. Okay. So I think one of my mentors, who is still my mentor today, once told me, if you're a transformer or you're in transformation and everyone likes you, you've not been doing your job. Because by nature, So transformation is really, it involves changes, it involves getting out of the comfort zone, and for sure, there will be folks who may not feel comfortable that you obviously have to work with and try to get them on board. But at the end of the day, I think it's I guess the greater good.
Yes.
Right. And so if everyone was still in the comfort zone and they're like, we're very happy with you, that in itself shows that something might be wrong. Now, this really helped me because it took away a lot of stress and helped me to sleep at night, right? Rather than worry about, am I being Mr. Popular and so on. So I really love this advice that my mentor imparted.
It reminds me of, I had a wonderful boss who is a mentor and friend of mine still about 20 years later. And I remember her saying to me, Tina, would you rather be seen as nice or respected? And I said, respected, absolutely. And she said, exactly. So sometimes you've got to make hard decisions and do things, to your point, for the greater good. That might be that people feel that they're disappointed in you, that you haven't just kept the status quo. So yeah, I love that advice from your mentor.
You've got some really smart mentors.
Absolutely. Well, that's another thing of working smarter, getting great mentors.
Yeah, that's true.
Fantastic. And to wrap up, Chee Hoong, I'd love to do some rapid fire questions. Are you up for it?
Okay.
Okay. If you think over the last few years, what's the best thing you purchased for under, say, $100?
I think you're looking at it.
The shirt?
The shirt.
Very cool.
So this is basically batik, very popular in Indonesia and in Malaysia. And they're very cheap there too, but really great office wear. I can really say I'm literally the most colorful person in the office all the time. Yes.
Love it. And what about the book that you have either gifted or recommended the most to others?
Look, I think I'll give it 2 books instead of 1, right? So professionally, I think the book that I've gifted and recommended is really this book by Richard Bowles called What Color is Your Parachute?
Oh, I love that book.
I know. Yeah.
I think it'll be up here somewhere. It's one I recommend. So as well. So why do you recommend it to other people?
Yeah. So the book is basically split into 2 parts, right? So one is the really technical part about how to get that job, right? So how do you interview and how do you write a CV and how do you negotiate and so on. But it's the second part of the book that I'm really interested in and I found most useful, and my own mentees have found very useful. It's the thinking about what you really want to do in life, right? And there are some frameworks and diagrams that help you guide your thinking, and that's really, I think, for career changes and maybe even a couple of years once. You should all do that and say, okay, look, are we really doing the thing that we're passionate about? I
love that so much. And whenever someone reaches out and says, I'm thinking of doing something different, it's usually a book I recommend. I remember doing, I know it's rapid fire, but just stay with me for a minute, doing my own list of going, what am I good at? And what am I passionate about? Right. And where do they overlap? And realizing, okay, I'm good at Excel. I'm not passionate about it. I'm passionate about running and helping other people to look after themselves and be productive. Oh, I'm passionate and I'm good at it.
You are.
And that is how I ended up through that model and that framework, actually developing my own business now to help other people because it's something I'm passionate about.
That's right.
And also have the deep expertise in. So yeah, great book.
And that's why you admire it so much and why I'm so humbled to be on the show, right? That your reputation precedes you.
Thank you. And we've got 2 last questions.
Sure.
So what's the most fearless thing you've done over the last couple of years?
Okay, so this might sound a bit cliche, but it's not. It's very small, but also very powerful and very difficult to do. It's really giving and receiving feedback. And for me and my team, that's what we live every day. The easy feedback, I know you've done a great job. And so that's really easy. And of course, that's important as well. But the character changing ones and the ones that, we especially in an Asia context, that we most fear doing, is providing this hard edge feedback that I loved what you were doing, but maybe we could think of this other way next time. And it's really also difficult when it's upward,
Yes.
managing your bosses, right? So that requires a certain fearlessness. It's something that, with a bit of a mindset shift we can train, and it's also a bit more difficult in certain cultural contexts than others, right? So that's something that every time I need to give, I still have to think about, okay, is this the right way to say it? Because I have that fear, but you conquer that fear of providing that feedback.
It's so important. So there's not the blind spots for the people who you work with. It's amazing. And final question, what does outcomes over hours mean to you?
So to me personally, it's really being able to achieve all my goals in life, right? And then balancing and making trade-offs, right? Professional goals, personal goals, and spiritual goals, social, family goals as well. And so just to close this, I really love this outcomes thinking. How can I achieve and optimize the right outcome rather than the output of how many hours I would work. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chee Hoong, it has been an absolute pleasure having you today. We can actually shake hands in person.
I know.
So, fantastic. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Likewise, thank you very much for having me here. And thank you, I think, also to the audience. All right. Bye-bye.